I'm going to stand up for a second because I think one of the problems is we've been taking this sitting down. 110 million Americans, 1 out of every 2 adults, had their personal information compromised. And anytime that happens, 1 out of 4 are a victim of identity theft. And we've talked a lot, but what we haven't talked about is why Target's not sitting here answering the question of how it happened and what they're going to do to prevent it. That is an outrage. It's an outrage that Target and Neiman Marcus wouldn't come to this committee. Because right now, if you're an American, you have a big bullseye on you. Your privacy is a target. It is a target for everyone whose information is in the clear. And the 2 biggest retailers who had a tremendous breach during the Christmas holiday season won't answer questions. What does that tell you? That tells you they don't care what you think or what I think or what the consumers think, because there's no financial penalty when they don't care. You'll have lots of talk this afternoon from my esteemed colleagues and others about everything these retailers in this industry could have done to prevent this from happening. We all know the 3 major things: the chip card technology, voluntary industry standards that are broken, and this is the big one: no financial penalties when there is a breach. If you don't make corporations pay when they violate your privacy, you know what? Your privacy is going to be violated again. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. You know this is true. This is how American capitalism works. And it does work. But it only works when there's a counterbalance to a violation of our trust. The problem we have with privacy is this. There is no value to our privacy under the law. No value whatsoever. When you have your house stolen, your property stolen, your money stolen, it's worth something under the law. What is your privacy worth? This, by the way, these are excellent papers by your committees. Unbelievable. And the conclusion is there is no protection for the consumer. Sure, retailers and banks can maybe go after each other under very specific circumstances, but what can the consumer do? 1 out of 4 victims of a data breach is going to be an identity theft victim, according to statistics. If that holds for Target, we're talking 27 million people who are victims of identity theft, and those people aren't going to be able to recover a dime from Target, which actually disclosed the breach, I think, in a reasonable time period. Neiman Marcus waited 3-4 weeks to tell the public. That's really outrageous. What you can do to change this is not change technology, because I agree, reform should be technology neutral, but you can make sure that the same standards that apply to our medical privacy, where there is a price to pay when there's a breach, apply to our financial privacy. We have something called the California Medical Information Act. And do you see that many violations of our medical privacy? I mean, you do hear about UCLA having 20,000 records here, or another hospital have 10,000, but every time there's a violation of our privacy, Anthem Blue Cross put our Social Security numbers online last year. It paid a couple of $100 million in a settlement. Under the California Medical Information Privacy Act, every time your privacy is violated and let out in the open, because there's a problem with just protecting it, it's $1,000 for each consumer. If you give consumers that same right in the financial sphere, you will do your sworn duty to uphold the California Constitution provision, Article 1, Section 1, which says our privacy is an inalienable right. And let me say something. Lenny Goldberg from the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, a tremendously great organization, as is Consumers Union, came up with this number, and I believe this is the number before the Target breach. Since 2005, Privacy Rights Clearinghouse counted 663,607,378 records breached in 4,175 data breaches. 663 million. I think it's before Target. So add on 150 million between Target and Neiman and Michaels and the others. Consumers need a hammer. And I would say in this California Financial Information Act, there are 4 key things. Change notification standards to make them immediate. There is a big loophole in the law. If a retailer says a law enforcement's going to inhibit the a report to the public is going to inhibit law enforcement, they get a little bit of a loophole and they don't have to disclose this to the public. We know we think Neiman Marcus, who's not here today to answer the charge, waited to get through the holiday season rush to actually tell the public. We don't know for sure, but that is a good guess given when they found out about the data breach and how long they waited to tell the public. Target, for not being here, which is a big problem, actually of the first data breach told the public pretty quickly, and it's not clear, they apparently didn't know about the second. But there is a problem when you have a notification law that has a loophole that says you don't have to tell the public if you believe it's going to impede law enforcement. 2, write minimum security standards into the law so that they're no longer voluntary. Voluntary standards aren't standards. They're not security. Set limits on how much time data can be retained and limits on what information can be collected and retained. Because Target's breach, for instance, included not only its customers' data, but third-party data that apparently it had purchased. Right. If you limit what can be collected and retained and bought and sold, you're going to have a big part of the problem taken care of. And you can do that in California. We've done it before. The last thing is, and most importantly, create a private right of action. Put a price tag on retailers' mistreatment of our financial information. Until there's a price to pay, Target and other retailers are going to make us the targets. And that's just not right. So if you are as outraged as I am by what you've seen, I brought you some T-shirts that I hope you all will wear or return. But please take one, because whether you think Target was wrong or right, to not show up means it doesn't care. The same thing with Neiman. That's just wrong. They need to know that they have to answer questions when the California legislature calls, because they're certainly not going to answer questions for consumers. So please, I don't know if I can pass this around with the sergeant. They could take a
Thank you, Mr.
Rat. But thank you for your time, and I appreciate you looking at this issue.
And thank you for your generosity. Ms. Garcia.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.